Good evening, everybody. It's Kevin here, and we are live YouTube streaming tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about a topic that, unfortunately, I'm pretty familiar with, and that is the home inspection. Shouldn't really say unfortunately, but fortunately and unfortunately, I'm familiar with it. It's the home inspection process, but we are also going to talk about some home inspection horrors, some tips as both a homeowner and a home buyer that. For home sellers, what you're going to look for to get your house ready so that you hopefully fly through a home inspection. And for buyers, a lot of the red flags and things like that are going to come up that you want to keep your eyes open for as you go through the property on your own, and then definitely while you are inspecting the home. So I've got a special guest tonight. His name is Pete Lim, and Pete is actually the owner and home inspector with Thin Line Inspections. So with all that being said, why don't we welcome Pete to the show?
Hey, Kevin. How are you?
Hey, man. How you doing?
Not too bad.
Good. So Happy New Year, Pete.
Likewise.
I don't think it's too late in the year. We're actually, tomorrow's the 15th. So I think once we get to tomorrow, I can't say Happy New Year anymore because now we're kind of, edging more towards like February or so. But Happy New Year to you. And, I figured I'd ask you, what do you think about New Year's resolutions? Are you like a New Year's resolutions guy? And if so, like, what type of things are you looking to like change this year or to implement?
I used to be a New Year's resolution guy, but I kind of found that I was kind of setting myself up for failure. So, I don't do resolutions anymore. I just dedicate myself every day to, be a good father, a good husband, good friend, and good home inspector, good baseball coach. Just do the best I can on a day-to-day basis.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I usually do some resolutions, but typically they are pretty much gone by that February or so. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot to, it's easy to kind of come up with things and you wish things could be a little bit different. You could change things, but yeah, I agree with you. I probably, my resolution for next year is not to make a resolution. How about that? So
that's an easy one. I think you can do it.
You got it. Okay. Thank you for your faith in me. So look, I can't go too far into this without having to point out the flag that's behind you. And we're not talking the Maryland flag. We're talking about the Redskins flag, i.e. now the Commanders and everything. And are you from the area? I mean, are you like a Redskins / Commanders fan?
Lifelong. So since I was born, rooted for the Redskins, then unfortunately the Washington football team and now Commanders, but super excited after decades of mismanagement.
Yeah.
Started super excited and looking forward to a really bright future with a great quarterback.
Yeah, no, me too. So any predictions for the game coming up this week? I mean, it was an awesome game last week. I mean, these guys, I don't know, man, my heart, I don't know if it can take any more of these, winning on the last, going for it on fourth down and winning on the last play of the game and doinking it off of the upright and everything. But any predictions for this week coming up?
Close game. And I think we're going to surprise some people. And I think we're going to pull off the upset. Got to have faith.
I think it can be done. I don't know that it will be done. And I think maybe that's part of me just protecting my own self from heartache and heartbreak and everything. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of reverse psychology. I saw some statistics on like ESPN, and I think the chances of us winning is they have it at 27% and Lions at 73%. So that's probably about accurate. So, I think, hey, Lions only lost 2 games or so. So, can't blame them for being a favorite against us. But I agree with you. It would not shock me if we win, and I think we're going to play a good game. So anyways, Pete, so, we're going to talk tonight a little bit about, a lot of it really, about the home inspection process. We're going to talk about some of the horrors and things that you've seen out there, some scary moments, maybe funny moments, but we're also going to talk about, home maintenance things and tips that a homeowner can do to really kind of maximize the value of their property and also maximize the life of a lot of, let's say a lot of the appliances and, HVAC and things like that. So we're going to go through some of those things, but why don't you give me a little bit of background on you? You've said you're from the area and everything, but how did you get into being a home inspector?
So I swore to myself that I would never be a small business owner. Watching my parents both own small businesses and struggle, and here I am. Doing it for about 5 or 6 years now. Just kind of, I was working in property management as a general manager of the repairs division. Got years of hands-on construction experience, and just thank God for my wife who believed in me, and we took a leap, started the business, and been loving every minute of it. So
every minute of it, Pete.
Not every minute, just depends. It depends on the agent, really, more than anything else.
Really? I mean, so for you, it depends more on the agent than maybe even the home buyer in most cases?
It's a little bit of both. Some agents are a little too hands-off, where they don't show up for an inspection at all. Other agents are a little too involved. But, I manage it. I've kind of seen it all over. I've been inside over 2,000 houses. So it's pretty much seen everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am native to the area, born and raised pretty much in the DMV, Montgomery County resident. And, I've got 3 great kids, all great kids. Youngest is 12, 18 going on 19, and 20 about to hit 21.
Dang.
2 dogs, house, and just I'm a youth baseball coach. So I coached my older son through until high school and cycled back down, and now coaching my younger one. And when she reaches the high school age, I'll let him go and retire from coaching.
There you go. So let's jump into home inspections. And I think one of the questions I think that really I wanted to kind of hear from you is, what would you say, some of the most common misconceptions about the home inspection business, the home inspection process? Like, what do you see? What are some things that you could maybe shed some light on?
Yeah, so I think there is a misconception about who home inspectors are and what they're supposed to do. I think the biggest misconception is that we are not code inspectors. We inspect homes just as a generalist to look for issues, concerns, and defects. Hey, this is broken. This is a safety concern, things of that nature. Because we are not electricians, we're not plumbers, we're not HVAC professionals. Those trades all went to school and they had apprenticeships and years of experience. We cannot do that. And we don't know codes because they vary from national code to state code to county code to city code and even local jurisdiction code. So if I perform an inspection in the city of Rockville, it's going to be different from Gaithersburg, which is going to be different from somewhere in Frederick or Carroll County, Howard County. So we're not code inspectors. And additionally, we do not inspect every single thing in a house and find every single issue or deficiency. We do the best we can. We want to cover the major components of the house, the big ticket items, and then sort of the smaller things we'll try to find as we go along. But we certainly can't find everything that's wrong with the home.
Yeah, I mean, I would also imagine too, speaking, we're in Montgomery County, Maryland. That's where we're doing the majority of our business. And of course, within the county, you've got, as you just alluded to, you've got certain jurisdictions, like you have the city of Rockville, the city of Gaithersburg, Tacoma Park, and each one of those areas has their own various codes and everything. And so, I kind of like talk through the same thing with a lot of my clients, just kind of preparing them that, first of all, codes are going to be different every place. And that, one of the things they have to understand, and this is from my side of the fence, but it also leads into you because, once again, I'm working with them before in most cases, then I'm sent with them, identifying the property, getting all that put together, and then sending them your direction. But, codes change every day. And, I've told a lot of people too that, the homeowners cannot be responsible for keeping up with every code. They're not required to. Most everything out there these days is pretty much grandfathered, maybe with the exception of like smoke alarms or so, I would say. But, like I'll say something to somebody looking at a 1960s home, like, they can't be responsible for making updates to every code. If that were the case, then every house in the county these days would have a sprinkler system. And they don't, because anything that's being built today, and I think it's probably been since about 2006, 2007, in Montgomery County now has to have a sprinkler system, regardless of whether it's condo, townhome, or single family. So that's one of the things that I try to mention is that, they're not going to be responsible. Homeowners not responsible for every code. A lot of these things are grandfathered in.
Yeah, that's correct. So, you can't expect, a great example is the condo. Condos built before a certain time period did not have sprinkler systems. And as a multi-unit dwelling, you can't expect the owner of the building to retrofit the entire building with a sprinkler system. That would cost a small fortune. So it just is what it is, whether it's handrails or open risers or windows or whatever it may be. I wouldn't say it's grandfathered in, but more of that's kind of what it is. It's accepted. And so as far as a home inspector goes, at least from my perspective, I put in my report as information purposes. Hey,
Right.
This was built to an older standard. So that's why it's the way it is. But be aware that by today's standards, it doesn't meet the requirements.
Right. So going back to something you said, also is that, with regard to some of these things, also, are you helping people, obviously, the biggest thing that you're there for, tell me if I'm wrong on this, because maybe you might say I'm wrong about this, but I think the biggest thing you're there for is to identify defects that are in the property, especially the larger defects. I mean, every house is going to have something going on with it, your biggest thing is to find defects, but also, do you do anything as far as preparing people for, once the page turns and now it's their property, for things that they're going to need to do to, once again, take care of the property, maintain the property well, and to once again, get the longest lasting life out of the property and things like that. So.
Yeah, so I think the misconception also is that, home buyers think a home inspection to be limited to what's wrong with the house.
Right.
Reality is a good home inspector should be able to walk through the house and also talk to the client to say, hey, this should have caulk in the tub. It's part of periodic home maintenance. It's something you should have to do every few years, whether it's the windows, caulking those, opening and closing them periodically to make sure they're functioning well, things like that. Hey, you should have your HVAC serviced annually. You should have your water heater flushed annually. You should have your roof inspected and maintained every 3 to 5 years by a roofing company. So making those tips, those recommendations, and kind of giving them an understanding of, I'll take a step back. I think a great analogy that I like to use is to say that a home is like a car. You've got to take care of it in order for it to function and last. So a car gets oil changes, you get it washed, you have it waxed, you vacuum it out, tire rotations, things like that. It's no different than a home. The home does require certain things that you need to do as a homeowner in order for it to last longer and for there to be less potential for something to break down or leak or something of that nature.
Right. Well, and I think another analogy is it's just like a person too. Obviously you're going to get in most cases, longer lasting life if you exercise and you eat well, don't go in excess on crazy things, whether that be alcohol or food. So, and of course you need to go in for your checkups, your physical every so often and things like that. So I think there's a lot that kind of runs parallel with houses to cars and as well as people. So agreed on that one?
Absolutely.
So what would you say is, the biggest value? And I'm going to step back right now because I'm always on my videos on my YouTube channel, I will always, when I talk to the viewers out there, I talk about, realtor, but I always say like a professional realtor or a good realtor, or when I talk even about like, hey, some of the things you want to do to consider getting your home ready is a professional paint job, not just a paint job, because there's really differences there. So I'm always very clear to say, and I don't mind if you agree with this, although other realtors might see you say this and agree with me, but I think that 80% of the realtors out there suck. I've said that on many of my YouTube videos, and I think I'm actually being kind because I think it's probably closer to freaking 90%. But as far as that goes, I guess one of the questions is, what do you believe that the value that a good home inspector, a real professional home inspector, brings to the process, brings to the home buyer?
I think a lot of it is just buyers have sort of this aesthetic lens that they're viewing things through for the most part. They're going to the house and going, oh my gosh, it's freshly painted, new carpet, floors have been refinished, things like that. It's so clean. They just remodeled the kitchen, the bathrooms are updated, and they get so caught up in the excitement of potentially this being their new home that they're not really looking for, nor are they trained to look for those potential issues. I don't think an average home buyer going into a house is going to be opening up the HVAC system to look inside the furnace, or pulling the electrical panel cover off, or climbing up into the attic, or getting up on top of the roof. The nitty-gritty details are commonly and frequently overlooked. Right. And you're looking at so many houses that, as a buyer, that you just don't have the opportunity to go in and spend the time to dig into all those details. So that's why you just do need a good home inspector to come in. That's his sole purpose, to look past the cosmetics, to look past the aesthetics, say how are things functioning with the home and what condition are they in. And some home inspectors will say, hey, yes, it's on the older side, whether it's the HVAC or the roof, have roof maintenance done, have an HVAC person come out and start servicing it annually and do these necessary things to get more life and reliability out of those items.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and of course I see that because I'm on the front end all the time. I'm the one showing the property, and I'm the one who's seeing the reaction, either positive or negative, that the buyer is giving when they see the property, and so, and I would also say too, and I think a lot's changed over the years because, when I first started in the business going back 30 years ago, most of the buyers I was working with, and when I first started, most of the people I was working with, I was young, I was in my 20s, and most of the people that I was working with were kind of in the same age. So, it's pre-internet and all those things. And most of my clients would come out there with a clipboard, old-fashioned clipboard. They'd be like, all right, they weren't expecting perfection. It was like, I can do this, I can fix that. Maybe I'll ask to try to negotiate the seller to do this or that, and then we'll just deal with the rest of the stuff. And today, it's just simply not that way. I mean, especially when you're talking about millennials, Gen Z, especially, because what I find is these are people that were raised on Amazon, where instant gratification, they've grown up with an iPhone in their hand. And so, and that's not to say there's anything negative. It's just different. And they're used to instant. I mean, hell, to be quite honest with you, we all are these days. We've all been spoiled by the Amazons of the world and the internet and our iPhones and everything. But what I find is that too often, especially the younger buyers, but even older buyers as well, they get really tied in emotionally to, the moldings and the new fixtures or the new kitchen and, the wood flooring and the nice deck and things like that, which are all nice things to have, at the same time too, what are the bones like? And a lot of them are not trained to really know that. So I kind of agree with you. I mean, I'm certainly not a home inspector, nor am I a structural engineer, or any of those things. But at the same time too, I do think that I have a pretty good working knowledge and a pretty good eye of things to be able to point out some of those things and look past, a lot of the frou-frou stuff. So
it's also about, really at the end of the day, it's about preparing the buyers for the home, not just for the purchase, but I feel like I have a responsibility as a home inspector because I'm there for their best interest.
Right.
And so the house might be great and they might have typically most buyers are going to say, hey, we're spending every last cent to put down a down payment and start making mortgage payments. And they're not flush with cash after that purchase. They have to furnish it. They want to decorate it. They want to paint it, which is all great. But without the understanding of, hey, the HVAC system is going to have to be replaced likely within the next 5 years.
Right.
The roof is starting to get on a little bit of the older side. You need to start budgeting for that. So educating them to say, hey, these are the things that you're going to have to start budgeting for.
Yeah.
That way they can expect to say, okay, all the appliances are about 10 years old. The national average for appliances is 10 to 15. They may look great, but the expectation is 10 to 15 years. You better start budgeting for new appliances. new roof, new windows, new HVAC, new water heater, whatever it is. And it does change how buyers look at a home. They go, oh my gosh, we budgeted incorrectly. We budgeted for our mortgage and our spending and things like that, but we didn't necessarily budget for these big sort of replacement items or repair things that have to happen.
Right. So I have a confession. I was asking you a question a while ago, and right in the middle of the question, because I am a little nervous. These things make me a little bit nervous. I completely freaking forgot the question I was asking you and had to pivot. But I'm going to go back to it because I'm 58 years old, Pete. So some of this shit, comes back to me a little late. But one of the things you had mentioned is, you're not, structural engineer. You're not an HVAC guy. You're not a plumber. You're not an electrician. So, what happens when you find things within, let's just say it's within the realm of HVAC. I've been with you on inspections where you found mold in the HVAC. Let's say you find an issue within the electric panel. I mean, we're not just talking about just something small where you got a little bit of reverse polarity, but so how do you handle those type of things where you find something and you're either 100% sure that something's wrong with it, or you're like, you know what, this goes a little bit beyond my scope and everything. How do you handle those things and conveying those to the potential home buyer?
Yeah, great question. I think that's.
I knew it was too. I forgot it when I was asking you though.
I think it's about understanding that I am not. I don't know everything, so I have to defer to those who are those specialists. But there are certain circumstances, like you mentioned, reverse polarity in an outlet. Oh, it's wired incorrectly. That's something a good DIY person could remedy. Watch a couple of YouTube videos, go get an outlet for $1. If you have the tools, you can do it yourself.
Right.
And with my hands-on experience, I can sort of provide some level of guidance to say, hey, if you've got a good handyman, they can take care of that. And if it's something I'm not comfortable with, or if it's something that I feel I can't give a definitive answer, I always say, hey, you should, and I defer to whoever it is, you should call a good electrician, have them come out and have them further evaluate the electrical panel.
So you basically, you will not refer them by name necessarily, but refer them to, go check in with, have a licensed HVAC person for further information and further, details.
That's correct. It's almost like, again, going back to a car. Your car's making weird noises. Something's wrong. You can identify what it is, so you're going to take it to the mechanic. Kind of the same thing, like HVAC systems that make are really noisy. Hey, I identified in the report and say the HVAC system is really noisy. You should have an HVAC person take a look at it.
And you know what, Pete? I'm just going to do it one more time again. I'm going to go back to the example of the human being. So, you go into your primary care guy, and he starts seeing something wrong with, some of your vital statistics. He might say, or she might say, hey, you're going to want to go over to the cardiologist, and have this checked or whatever. So it's like basically referring to more of a specialist and everything.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's your primary is sort of your home inspector to some degree.
Yeah.
Then you have your specialist, whether it's GI, cardiologist, neurologist, whatever it may be.
Right. So we have a few questions here, Pete, and so I'm going to ask you one. So Daniel Lowry asks, thin line, is that a reference to military or police service?
That's a great question. I get that one a lot. So I am a veteran, and I do believe strongly about supporting our military. My wife works for the government, and a lot of her friends and coworkers and colleagues are police officers. So really believe strongly in supporting them. So it's a play on the thin blue line.
Right.
I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that. There's also the thin red line. There's also a green line, a yellow line, an orange line. They all represent some branch or department, and it's a play on words. I came up with this logo myself, and just thin line home inspections. And that's where that came from. And, for me, a portion of every home inspection, I donate a portion of that home inspection fee towards my local charity, which is Platoon 22, based out of Frederick. And they are fighting veteran suicide.
Yeah. And I've got a little experience with them too, because I had done a video earlier last year with Nikki Falzone. And it's just an unbelievable cause. So once again, throw that out there again to anybody that's listening so they can check on it. I mean, I know that they've got a website and a Facebook page, but, while you're bringing it up, I think it's definitely worthy of mentioning that.
Yeah. So that's Platoon 22, and go check them out. They do great work. They've got an amazing facility right out of Frederick, doing amazing things for veterans, whether it's helping them find a job, helping them get back up on their feet, and just steering them in the right direction, whether it's getting benefits or whatever it is. I actually inspected their current multi-dwelling unit in Hagerstown, if I remember correctly. They are using that building as a transition home for veterans who do not have a place to live. Yeah, so the veterans go there, they live there. Once they're back on their feet and they move out, they just bring the next veteran right in.
Yeah, and to those watching out there, once again, I kind of interviewed Nikki probably about 6 months ago, toured the facility in Frederick. I think at the time they had just purchased that property in Hagerstown. I think that was maybe I might be wrong about that. But honestly, like, dude, blown away with that. And you were there that day because you kind of helped me through that as well. And kind of it made the introduction to Nikki. And once again, completely blown away. And I also saw that earlier this year, she was recognized at one of the Commanders games. They brought her out as like one of those hometown heroes. So definitely anybody who is, interested, they got a little bit of funds and they got a little love in their heart and they want to give that towards local, supporting veterans. Platoon 22 is one of those places I can definitely highly recommend. So anyways, getting back to the real estate, we got another question. So Karen Gardner asks, what's the most common problem you find when inspecting a house?
Oh, that's a good one. I think from my perspective, the most common, I'm not going to say problem, but most issues occur in the basement. So if there's a basement, that's where you're going to find the most problems. That's because generally that's where all your mechanicals are located. That's where your foundation's located. So typically, the number one enemy for a home is water, whether it's through the roof, but primarily through your basement walls. Dirty gutters, lack of downspout extensions, lack of a dehumidifier, all those things contribute to moisture and dampness in the basement. And with elevated humidity levels, you're going to potentially have some degree of, I'm going to use a technical term, suspected microbial growth, or as commonly known as mold. And you may not know it. So it's very important to keep the humidity levels down in your basement. But that's the most problematic area. Fantastic question. I think it's super important to understand that my role as a home inspector isn't just to help buyers. I do also help sellers. How often you're taking your car in and having your mechanic look at it more frequently than you have someone come in and take a look at your home. People live in their home 10, 15, 20 years and never have someone independent with nothing to sell you come in, just take a look around, look in your attic, check your foundation, check your HVAC system, your electrical panel, just making recommendations to make sure things are what they should be and there are no issues or concerns with those areas.
Right. That's pretty awesome. I honestly, I've never really thought much about that, but I think that's an excellent idea for somebody, maybe how often now be truthful here, Pete. Like, how often would you suggest? Obviously not every week. Would you even suggest that every year, every few years? How often would you suggest for a homeowner to have that done?
I think that is a difficult question. It depends on the style of home. Obviously, you're not going to have a home inspector come in to a condo nearly as often as you would a single family home. And you would not have a home inspector come in as frequently on a smaller single family home, 1,600 square feet versus a 7,500 square foot house.
Right.
But typically for a single family home, I'd say you should have someone come take a look after the initial kind of walkthrough, maybe every 3 or 4 years. Just say, hey, let's just have someone come back out, take another look, just to make sure we're doing things right, that we're still taking care of things the way we're supposed to take care of them. But I think after that initial one, maybe after the second one, the homeowner should have a good grasp on how to take care of their home.
What are your thoughts on like for a homeowner getting like, contracting with an HVAC company on a contract to come out every, twice a year to check the, spring and fall cleanup? What about things like, termite inspections, anything like that? I mean, what are your thoughts on some of those things for preventative maintenance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's preventative. I mean, they call it preventative maintenance for HVAC servicing, but I think it's kind of like an oil change. You should be doing that. And I think you should be flushing your water heater annually. You should be having your HVAC serviced at least once a year. You should be having a roofer come out and perform roof maintenance every 3 to 5 years. You should have your contractor check all the caulk around the windows and trim your bathrooms, your sinks every few years. You as a homeowner should be clearing out under your vanities, clearing out under your kitchen sink every 6 months or so to check for leaks. Ironically enough, I was messing around under my kitchen sink and found there's a leak under my kitchen sink. So, it's something you should be doing. And I
mean, do you need to run now? I mean, are you okay? I mean, I don't want to hear, dude. Like, I don't want to feel accountable for flooding in your house. Everything. Are we good? I in the same way, I believe in hiring for those professional companies to come out on an annual or, semi-annual basis as needed, especially when it comes to HVAC. And I've done a lot of videos on YouTube about, proper home maintenance and the things that you want to do. Like, for example, change the furnace filter. I usually suggest at least once every 2 to 3 months, but probably better more once a month. And I'm a big believer in make it easy for yourself, because a lot of these things are out of sight and out of mind when it comes to this. So I'm like a huge believer in the Google Calendar. Like, I got so many friggin' reoccurring appointments in the Google Calendar. Like, I've got it in there every month to replace my furnace filter. But guess what? A lot of times I'm not going to have a damn furnace filter. So it's in my calendar, but I don't have the furnace filter. I go to Amazon, I set it up that every freaking month, or actually I think I have it set where it's like every 3 months they're sending me like 3 or 4 of them or so. So it just shows up at my house. I don't have to go on out to, Lowe's or Home Depot to buy it. I don't even have to think about going online. Just put these systems in place to make it easy for yourself. And when it comes to, these type of things also, where you're saying like, every 3 to 5 years, have your roof checked. I mean, nobody's going to freaking remember. I don't remember what I did six months ago, let alone, so put it in that Google Calendar or whatever you use so that it comes up and it just shows up and you're like, boom, I need to do that stuff. So
absolutely.
That's just Kevin's little tip out there. I'm really not very handy at all. Anybody who knows me well knows that, but I do pay for people to do these type of things, but it's one of those things where you still have to remember it. You still have to make the damn call or buy the thing. So just make it easy on yourself.
Yeah. And I think that you bring up really good points. I think the biggest thing is there's a lack of education when it comes to being a homeowner.
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge, is that so many, and I'm sure you see this too, is with your pool of clients, what percent are first-time home buyers?
Right.
And sure, they've lived in a house, perhaps. Most of them are renting an apartment or renting a townhouse or something of that nature. They have limited understanding or knowledge. No one's actually sat down with them to say, hey, these are all the different things you need to do. This is your water main shut off. This is how you turn off the electricity to the house. This is how you, check for leaks and all those different things. So I feel like my role as a home inspector goes beyond this is what's broken or this is unsafe. This is how you take care of your house. This is what you should be doing. This is how much it would generally kind of cost. So they can start building that sort of into their day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month schedule of not just, time, but also costs.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we got a few more questions. Danny, well, first of all, Danny Lowry said, thank you for your service. He was the one who asked about the name of the company. And then he also asked, how long should your home buyers expect to receive a full inspection report? So I guess the question is, I think the question is, from the time that you do the inspection, how long, what is the turnaround time in order, to get the buyer the inspection? And while you're on that, why don't you talk just briefly about the home inspection and what a buyer can expect to get on the inspection report from you?
Yeah, and I have great sample reports on my website. And I've invested heavily into the software that I use. So it's not just a PDF of 7,500 pages. It's actually interactive online too. So everything's hyperlinked. There are pictures. I can do videos, all these different things. But to answer his question, I generally turn around the report by the next morning for a full home inspection report. Now, certainly there are options available as well for buyers, and similar to what would be a consultation for a current homeowner or a seller, or even an investor, which I work with all those groups, is just what's called a walk and talk or a consultation. I show up, you have your notepad, you have your phone, you're taking pictures and taking notes, and we're just walking around the property looking for various issues, concerns, and that way you don't have to pay for slightly higher rate. You don't have to pay for a full home inspection report. But certainly, even as a homeowner, you may opt to just say, you know what, I want a full home inspection report because I need a list. I want pictures. I've done that for homeowners as well.
Right. So tell me, what are the top 3 home maintenance items that you find that most homeowners neglect?
Sadly, is keeping your gutters clean. Too often, like
usually, and that's not a real pricey one there.
No, it's not. And then
once again, put it in your damn Google Calendar.
Yeah, and like you said, it's out of sight, out of mind, especially the gutters, right? You just walk in and out of your house, you're not looking up and going, how do the gutters look? You know, so what happens is when you don't keep those gutters clean, the gutters get blocked, the water level rises inside that gutter, then overflows around your foundation, and now that adds to a damp basement. So that's a big one. Caulk, multiple places, bathtubs and showers, sinks, whether it's in your bathroom or kitchen, around your windows, around all your wood trim around the house. All those areas can be negatively affected because that water gets behind the tile, gets behind the vanity, into the walls, gets into the wood trim, starts rotting the wood trim. Leaks into the home from around the windows. So caulk is another big one. Lastly, I'd say HVAC servicing. Shockingly, I think if I had to put a number on it, I'd say 80%, 75% of people do not have their HVAC systems serviced.
I think it's more than that, but
yeah, it could very well could be. But I pop it open, I look inside and go, yeah, this hasn't been touched by a professional ever. It's 20 years old, and it's clogged with dust and debris. It's rattling. It's making noises. It costs $75, $85 for a person to come out once a year, service it, keep an eye on it, making sure everything's running right. It'll last a lot longer.
So the thing that's interesting is the 3 things you mentioned, are pretty freaking cheap. Depending, and I'm not suggesting anybody go out there with a crazy ladder or whatever, and killing yourself on fault, because people do that. But when to hire somebody to come clean your gutters, typically we're looking at a few $100. I had that done about a month ago. Usually you're looking at a few $100 there. Caulk is super cheap. And once again, that's the type of thing, depending on the location of it, you could either do it yourself, or, once again, if it's on windows that are up high, I would highly suggest hire somebody to go out and do it. But we're talking like really cheap stuff though. However, by not doing it, and I see it all the time, it can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And it's just these little things, these little tweaks that need to be done. And so I asked you that question kind of knowing my thoughts on it, and you pretty much nailed my top 3 verbatim, because I see it all the damn time. So,
yeah, I've seen houses that are wonderfully maintained, great shape inside and out. And the one thing is the gutters are completely packed, and that's one thing they've neglected. It's just, again, it's one of those things, out of sight, out of mind. And it's, yes, you should probably have your gutters cleaned a couple times a year, but caulk every 3 to 5 years, maybe. Yeah. So it's again, it's a low cost thing. HVAC servicing, again, $75, $85 a year, low cost. So yeah, you're completely right.
Yeah. No, it's amazing when you see things that people just, ignore. And once again, it's a lot of those, it's the out of sight, out of mind things. Because guess what? We all got life, and life has been pretty freaking weird the last 5 years. And so it's easy to kind of forget about these things, but it's a little bit like cancer that can build up. If you get it early, usually there's not going to be a problem. But if you let it go, then, it just becomes a bigger issue. So why don't you give some of our viewers, and these are people that might be looking at homes to buy this spring or whenever. Why don't you give us a few red flags that, when you're looking through a house with your realtor, or because you probably won't see a lot of this stuff online when you're looking online, but as you're going through the house with your realtor, give us some red flags that you should be keeping an eye out, because once again, it's easy to get captured with the new kitchen and all that. But, what are some things that they ought to really be looking out for?
Yeah. So even we've kind of talked about that market prep for homes, where homes look really good with the new paint or fresh paint, new carpet, refinished floors, all that good stuff. But it's also the other side of it, where homes haven't been prepped at all, and people are still focused on the aesthetics. Oh, the carpet needs to be replaced. The floors need to be refinished. So they're still focused on the aesthetics. But the key areas you really should be looking at when you go into a house, and obviously you're not going to have a ladder, to go up on the roof or climb up into the attic. So the best thing you can do is, most people, they pull up to a house and they walk right in, right? They just walk around the house. You really should walk across the street and look at the roof and say, how does the roof look? Is it stained? Has moss growing on it? Are there any missing shingles? How does the chimney look? Getting a good view of the roof and understanding what it looks like. Hey, pull out your phone. Hey, we've all got nice phones now. Pull it out, zoom in, take some pictures, look at the pictures. What are you seeing? If it feels wrong, usually something is wrong. And that's what I like to say.
Wow.
So roof is a big one, because obviously that can be expensive to replace, and that's something you don't want to have to deal with right off the bat when you're a new homeowner. So that's a big one that's easily, even with an untrained eye, you can kind of see some obvious defects. So roof is a big one. I would say what most people don't do and should be doing is getting down, opening those vanities, and looking at the plumbing. Opening the kitchen sink and looking under the sink. You will look for rust. You will look for leaks. You will look for water stains in the vanity. You will look for mold. Those are really easy things you can do. Hey, turn on the water and look under there. Is it anything actively dripping? Little things like that. Just give things a test run. Open and close the appliances. Just check the general condition. Windows is a very big one. Most people neglect. They look at the windows, but they don't actually check the functionality. So spot check a few windows, whether it's 3 or 4 throughout the house. Open and close them. How do they function? How do they operate? If they're tough to open and close, or they don't stay up, you're really looking at a big cost potentially, because windows on average are $1,000 per window installed. So if a house on average, typical single family house has anywhere from 20 to 30 windows. So you could be looking at $20,000 to $30,000 right off the bat. It's not just a functionality. I never, use my windows. I never open them. But what if there's an emergency and you have to get out? The window doesn't open in the bedroom.
Yeah.
That's a potential concern. So.
Yeah. And I think, especially me, I'm climate control boy. I do not like opening my freaking windows for anything. I also am the guy that takes off the screens on the front of the windows, because I want my house to look good, So I take the screens off the windows. Of course, my wife now, she's like, I want the screens on the windows because I want to open it up and get fresh air. I'm like, that is so freaking overrated. We got a deck in the back. It's a screen deck, but we're not opening up the damn front windows. So I couldn't tell you how my windows operate, because I'm like, we're not opening them at all. I want climate control, heat in the winter, cooling in the summer. If we want to get a little cross breeze, let's go out on the deck. So that's just me.
You're not in the minority there. You're not in the minority.
But yeah, really good points. And actually, in talking about it, I thought that was a great idea that you had about, instead of just walking in, taking a step back and looking at it from the outside. But you know what? I literally thought that this was a very good idea as well for home buyers. And I think I'm going to kind of adapt this into my home showing. It's a little different. It's a little bit more difficult this time of the year when it's cold out and we got, probably 4 inches of snow on the ground. But actually even going out and taking a loop around the house on the outside before you go in, because these days, Pete, everybody whose home's on the market, at least, 9 out of 10 are going to ask you to take your shoes off. They're going to want to put the booties on and everything, which is great. I'm all for protecting their home and not leaving a mess behind. But once you do that, then it's like, oh, well, how am I going to go out and take a look at the deck or walk in the backyard, and then typically by the time you're done with the house and you take your shoe covers off and everybody puts their shoes back on, okay, I'm running a little bit late to get to the next place, and you don't take that loop around the house. So I think that's something I'm actually going to kind of adopt, is to say, you know what, why don't we step back a little bit, take a look from the outside. Let's take a loop around the house, then go in, take our shoes off or put the shoe covers on. And so I don't know, man. You gave me a good idea there, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think people take a little too much from a cosmetic standpoint of how does it look inside, without really understanding the outer part that's protecting your home. What condition is that in? How does the trim look? How does the roof look?
Right.
Is the vegetation overgrown around the house? Things like that. Those are all things that contribute to what is it true conditions on the inside. So you got to take a good look at the outside.
So I got to ask you this. What is the biggest surprise you ever had going in and inspecting a house? And you don't have to keep it clean.
Biggest surprise. I once got into an attic, and once I popped my head through the attic, there were hypodermic needles.
What?
Spoons, balls of foil, beer bottles. And I had to just tell the client, hey, I am not going in that attic. There's no way I'm taking that risk. So that was a pretty, alarming one. One thing that still has surprised me and still surprises me is live snakes. So when you're in a crawl space or sometimes even in a basement and outside and a snake is just sitting there or all of a sudden slithers, gets me every time. So live animals, even larger dead animals.
I was going to ask you if you had any wildlife experiences. That's where I kind of thought you might go with it.
I get surprised by them, but I'm used to I've seen enough of it that I'm not overly surprised. But a lot of it does have to do with the condition of the home that the seller still living there is presenting that as I'm inspecting. I've seen what looks like loaded handguns throughout the house. I've seen very large boudoir photos on walls, intimate apparel sitting out amongst other things. So I see more interesting things that the seller's personal items more than anything else.
And it's kind of like, did anybody tell this dude the house is on the market? I mean, it's funny because with on Facebook there's a whole group on Facebook that's for realtors, and it's called Bad MLS Photos. And some of the photos that you see that are actually in the MLS. Now, I have to be honest with you, some of them I don't really believe really are in the MLS, but some of the photos are just like, like a torture chamber or whatever. And it's just like, seriously? I mean, I've been doing this for a while, so I've definitely seen some surprises. I've run into a few naked people along the way. And it's funny because, whenever I show a house, I always, even if it's vacant, and my clients know that it's vacant because they've seen photos online that it's empty and everything. I always will knock on the door first, and then I will open the door. I'm like, hello. And they're like, well, nobody's here. I'm like, yeah, you only think nobody's here. Believe me, I've seen some shit over all the years, and most of the shit I've seen is stuff that nobody wants to see. Hide that stuff. So,
Yeah, I did this one house where you go down to the basement, and it was literally at least 20 to 30 various um, stuffed animal heads on the walls everywhere,
Wow.
from deer to boar to I don't know, caribou or something, just all over the place. So you see
Yeah.
some weird stuff. I've seen panic rooms or safe rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see oddball stuff. I find that most interesting, but nothing
So,
truly surprises me anymore.
so we have a question from Chris Balto, and the question is asked. Well, one of them is I kind of had asked it already, but actually, what's the scariest thing you've ever found during a home inspection? Hypodermic
Scariest
needle.
hypodermic needles, and then firearms located in a house just sitting out. That's been probably the scariest thing. You just never know.
So Chris also asks, I think this is a good question. If you had to inspect a house blindfolded, what is one feature would you rely on to determine the home's overall condition?
I was blindfolded. One feature?
I don't know. I mean, that might not be worded exactly right. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, you could tell a lot by smell in a house, especially when it comes to water. You mentioned that water is probably one of the biggest culprits of things that you find in homes, And a lot of times you can smell the water, staleness and all that. What are you doing?
My hands.
Huh? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I could, if I was blindfolded, I'd just use my hands. I'd touch everything, but
Right.
that way I can turn on the faucets, reach under the vanity or sink, check for leaks, go to the basement. I can check for dampness on the foundation walls. I can run my hands across the, floor joists to see if they're compromised in any way. Certainly smell is a great one too.
Right.
I think hands would be number one. Just be able to touch
Smart.
and feel everything, opening,
Smart.
closing windows and doors and light switches on and off. But the best I could do.
Right. Right. So, beyond working with home buyers, because most of the time when I'm thinking of a home inspector, or when I'm thinking home inspection at all, it's working for a buyer. So beyond working with buyers, and you'd mentioned also, every now and then home owners or potentially people that might be looking to sell their home, I would imagine you have a small percentage of business there. Most of it's home buyers. But do you work with any other type of clientele, or besides home buyers, home sellers, or?
Yeah, so obviously the bulk of my clients are the buyers. A small percentage are sellers. A small percentage are homeowners. And another small percentage are investors.
Right.
People looking to either, I'm looking at this as a rental property, or invest, or something they want to rehab and flip, in other words. And but I also have been doing a lot more work with insurance companies.
Really?
So yes.
In what capacity there?
So a couple of my friends are insurance brokers, and I've had lengthy conversations with them about sort of the state of the insurance industry. And it's a bit of a state of turmoil, a little bit of chaos there. I know, President Biden's gotten involved to some degree over the, last year or so. So there's a lot of scrutiny there because of the rising rates. I'm sure everybody's feeling it with the homeowner insurance rates going up year over year, with every renewal, actually, every 6 months. It's a national thing. The fires out in California are going to affect our insurance rates, unfortunately.
Yep. Yeah,
it's just the reality of it. It's it's unfortunate. But what insurance companies are hiring me to do is they'll say, hey, here's the property address, contact the owner, we need you to go out. And I inspect, generally, it's going to be at least at minimum the roof. They'll say, we need a roof inspection.
Right.
Other times they'll say, hey, we also want the roof, the HVAC system, and the plumbing system. How old is the HVAC? What condition is it in? How old is the water heater? What condition is it in? So those three things, that will determine whether the person shopping for insurance will qualify. Or I just did one 2 weeks ago where she was up for renewal, and the renewal was based on the inspection of the roof.
Right.
So they would not renew her unless she had a roof inspection performed. So things are changing a bit, and people have to keep that in mind. So that's something I started recently doing. Probably I anticipate doing more and more of. where
Right.
insurance companies are going to make it harder for people to renew or shop around and get new coverage.
Well, and you actually, while you were talking about that, it made me think of something else, which I'm actually quite surprised we don't deal with in Montgomery County. But, as far as, what are you finding these days with permitting? The best example I can give is, once again, I keep working on this 80% rule because it seems to be right on just about anything across the board. But I would say these days, in Montgomery County, of the basements that are finished, that were not finished by the builder, but finished by a homeowner, I would say that 80 to 90% of them have not been permitted. Do you see a time that that's going to be an issue? Because I get asked that question every now and then from homeowners. Like, I'll come to their house, and in most cases they have awesome looking basements. I mean, they had a professional job done, but they're like, oh my God, it wasn't permitted. Is that going to be a problem? And I typically say it most likely will not be an issue. It probably will not come up on a home inspection. But from the insurance aspect of it, with everything that's changing in the insurance, field, do you see that possibly being an issue somewhere down the road?
I don't think so for basements or anything interior wise. As far as the quality of work that's been done, if I see a pattern of unprofessional work, sort of a poorly done DIY type level, caulk super messy, trim is crooked, things are wired kind of weird, janky, whatever it is, I note that in the report and say, hey, this does not look like it was done by a professional. You should have it evaluated, corrected, make it right. If there's an ongoing pattern, I will talk to the buyer and say, there's a lot of unprofessional work here. But as far as permits go, I think the only thing you should really be concerned about when it comes to permits is taking the structure and building outward, or not as quite as often as up, but if an addition was added without a permit or a deck was added without a permit, maybe you should be a little more concerned because now it's more a public view.
Right.
Where the only time you're really going to get flagged is if you, as the new homeowner, say, I'm going to pull a permit to have this done to my home. The code inspector for the county, the city, whoever it is, comes out and says, hey, that doesn't look right or done well. And it's usually on a larger scale.
Right.
And he'll say, let me check my records to see if this was actually ever permitted.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, oh, this wasn't permitted. I'm going to have to flag you for that. We need to have this inspected. You need to pull the permits, etc. But a basement's not going to jump out to a code inspector.
Right.
For the county or the city. So much less concern there. It's going to be more of that build out of the house.
So let me ask you this. I mean, this is kind of not really within the home inspection side of things, but what would you tell somebody? And I'm just going to I completely agree with you when it comes to putting on an addition, complete no-brainer, deck. I mean, you're going to have to do those. But when it comes to finishing off a basement, I remember when I finished my basement in my house I had in Germantown going back 20 years ago, I was the Boy Scout who, we got to get a permit. And so we interviewed 2 or 3 contractors, and probably where I'm going with this. They'll give you 2 different prices. And one with permits and then one without permits. And the one without permits sometimes could be, 20% less, we'll do it for X, if we get permits, and then we'll do it for X minus 20% or 10% if you don't do permits, because they don't want to go through the process. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, should you stand your ground and just pay the extra? I mean, and we're assuming that we're talking about professional companies out there. We're not talking about something fly by night or DIY type things.
Yeah, I mean, that just like anything, everyone's going to have a different opinion. It's the homeowner's comfort level when it comes to that, to say, right, I feel comfortable with this contractor. I've done my due diligence with reviews, referred by a friend. The contractor did great work over there. I'm not going to worry about a permit.
Right.
But if you really feel strongly about it and you don't mind paying that 10 to 20% extra, by all means, get the permit. I think it does help to some degree, maybe with some buyers, when the seller provides the documentation to say, we pulled the permit, had the basement refinished, here's the permit.
I agree. I agree. It's basically like showing your case as to why you're worth what you're asking for and everything.
Absolutely.
It's building a good case. A few other questions, and we're going to kind of wrap it up here. But as far as I was going to tell you. So my wife, when we first met, she was living in New Jersey. I'm down here. We dated long distance for 3 years or so, and she lived in a small township in New Jersey. And when she was putting her home on the market, when she was going to start moving down this way, she actually had to go through her little township there. They had to do an inspection before she put the property on the market. And when I tell you, I mean, her house, everything in the community was like 1930s, 1940s. It was around World War II built and everything. Beautiful houses. Everything was, different. It wasn't like these cookie cutters. Beautiful area. But they made her get it inspected beforehand. I mean, and gave a whole laundry list of things to do before it went on the market. And I just remember, and of course, while I'm not licensed in New Jersey and I wasn't her agent, let's be honest, I kind of was her agent, but not her agent and everything. So, and I kind of looked at that. I'm like, holy cow, if they did that in this area, I think I would probably just retire and work at Home Depot. Like, I can't imagine, and I'm shocked in Montgomery County that I would eventually think that somehow that will come that direction. I don't know. Maybe Montgomery County is just too large. There's a million people living in here, and this is a smaller township. But it was amazing the stuff she had to fix. Part of her sidewalk out in front of her damn house. It wasn't even like her walkway. It was like they had to repay or take a piece out and put new concrete in. It was crazy. So. Anyways, kind of wrapping up, what is the best, what advice would you give somebody who's looking to purchase a home and how to pick the right home inspector?
Yeah, so that's a good one. Because I think too many people are focused on what things cost. And I think you kind of alluded to it earlier, talked about it earlier about the whole Amazon thing, right? We shop on Amazon, not just for convenience, but they also most often have the best price. So you shouldn't be shopping for the cheapest home inspector, which is what I quite often get. This is the biggest investment you're going to make in your lifetime. You're not buying a sofa, you're not buying a desk, you're spending $4, $5, $6, $1 million, whatever it is. You're spending a lot of money. So to save $25 or $50 on a home inspector, I just don't think that's a wise way to try to select one. You really should sort of ignore that part of it and say, I need to pay what I need to pay based on what I read online. I read their reviews. And if at all possible, get that home inspector on the phone and have a conversation with them. You should develop a rapport and understanding to say, oh my gosh, I've had conversations with potential clients who end up using me. They say, oh my gosh, you're so whatever it is, they fill in the blank. You have to have a comfort level with your home inspector.
Right.
If you've got a great relationship with your realtor and your realtor says, hey, I've got a great home inspector, at this, I still say, yes, it's great your realtor has a home inspector, but do your due diligence.
Right.
Check who is the home inspector, what company, read their reviews, maybe get them on the phone, just have a quick chat, get to know them. That way you develop a relationship, a rapport. You may feel uncomfortable with them on the phone and go, I don't know if I want to, how I feel about this. Let me find my home inspector. That's really important. I think reading the reviews is really important. Understand their background. They should have something in their bio on their website about who they are, not just their personal stuff, which is great. What are their credentials? I can tell you from personal experience, when I took my home inspector class for the state of Maryland, and took my national exam, out of the 25 people in the class, I'd say 80 to 90% had no background in any of the trades. IT people who have retired early, need something to do on weekends, stay-at-home mom, these types of people.
Sounds like the realtor pool. It sounds like maybe the home inspection industry is peeling a little bit off of the realtor crowd. So it sounds like exactly the same group that we get.
Yeah, it's you want to find someone who's qualified. He might have 5 or 6 good reviews, but hey, does anything on their website say they used to be a general contractor? Or they have previous contractor experience. They used to be an HVAC technician or used to be an electrician. You need somebody with some background as well. So,
see, one thing I didn't realize, I mean, you've done home inspections for me in the past, so I'm familiar with what your home inspection reports look like, and they're very thorough with a lot of photographs, and which is great because, when I'm working for the buyer and I need to send that to the seller side of the fence, it's it's hard to deny, a photograph where you got a little arrow pointed to and say, hey, this is broken right here, or they see a leak or a drip or whatever. So, I think that thorough report with photographs and with, video if possible is phenomenal. I did not realize that you actually have a sample online on your website, which is smart because, people can go there and kind of check it out so they can get a feel for or a flavor for what you're going to provide them. Because speaking as an agent, it makes it so much easier when you have a good, articulate and clean, report to be able to present it to the other side. Because a lot of times this comes with a lot of, defense and deflection, from the other side, but it's hard to deny those photographs and everything. It's not an opinion. It's a freaking photograph here.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. And for anybody out there, that is considering buying this spring, how would somebody reach out to you if they have questions or they're interested in hiring you?
The easiest way to find me is on my website, which is apparently listed right there. So thinlinehomeinspections.com. You can also email me. It's just real simple, Pete@thinlinehomeinspections.com. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Not as much as I should be in today's world, but I have a presence there. But reach out to me. I am happy to have a conversation, whether you're a buyer, you're a seller, you're an investor, you're just a homeowner, your neighbor, you look at their house and go, oh my gosh, they should have somebody come take a look at their house. Whatever it is, I'm happy to help, at least point you in the right direction. If nothing else, hey, call a contractor, general contractor, have him come out and just take a look around the house and get some recommendations. Whatever it is, I'm happy to help anybody.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate it. Once again, I'm going to say it for the last time in 2025, but Happy New Year. And
Happy New Year, Kevin. And congratulations on your recent wedding.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Look at that, man. I'm like legit.
It's going to take some getting used to seeing that on your hand.
Well, it's funny because I've been on a few appointments and I forget that it's on my hand. And so it's like, I tend to be expressive and talk a lot with my hands, and then I'll put my hand down and like kind of hard, not slamming it, but and it's like, I almost cracked somebody's glass table the other day. I'm like, holy shit, I might need to replace your glass table. And they're like, you're really not used to that, are you? And I'm like, no, but I'm getting used to it. So anyways, as I like to say, having Erin agree to marry me was probably the biggest sale I've ever had, so somehow she did it, I convinced her, twisted her arm a little bit, but anyways, no, but thank you for saying something there. And all right, well, everybody, I want to thank everybody for joining in. I want to thank you guys for your questions that you have. As always, you can follow me on YouTube. I'd love for you to subscribe. I've got this QR code on the screen right now. So if you're interested, you'd like to set up a one-on-one appointment, like a video conference through Google Meet, go ahead and just click on this right there. I'm figuring this camera thing out right there on the QR code, and it'll go right to my Calendly where you can see my schedule, and you can go ahead and plug in a time where we can talk for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, about anything you'd like to that's about real estate and everything. And as always, I'm pretty easy to reach. You can find me, you can text me easily at 240-793-7495. I've also got some of my social media handles below. But, just wanted to thank everybody once again. So I'll see you guys next week, next Tuesday between 6 and 7. So you guys have a great week, and go Commanders, go Redskins. We're going to do this. We're going to beat those Lions. And I had to say that because what you guys don't know is behind the scenes, I've got a producer, and his name is Radek, and he lives in Poland, but he's a huge Lions fan. So we kind of were joking. Pete and I were kind of joking with him a little bit ahead of time. I don't know why we're getting all mouthy about anything because we got really nothing to go on, but we are hoping that the Redskins / Commanders beat the Lions. But if they don't, then I'm pulling for the Lions for the Super Bowl. But thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you next week. Peace.